only 5 fucking months late.
Okay, so today I'm going to be testing out the resistance of various different materials. So I have a voltmeter here, so it's a pretty standard voltmeter. So I'm just going to turn it on, make sure it's on ohms, you can see right here. And these are the different settings right here that it can be. It is at the lowest, which is 200. This is the default reading when these aren't connected. And when these are connected, it gives me a reading. It gives me a reading of how much resistance is between them. And you can see it's very low just because they're touching each other and the current is flowing. Now it's also important to note that when you crank up the settings, you can pretty much get anything to work. Because any level of connection it'll be super sensitive. So even if I do this, it'll still pick up some sort of a reading. Because it's picking up levels of resistance that are too high for the smaller settings to measure. So by connecting the two wires to various objects, you can measure the amount of resistance that that object puts up when electric current is put through it. So I'm going to test that out with various objects. Alright, so let's test out this Lowe's paint mixing stick that's made of wood for some reason. Now when we have this, we're going to want to take our two prongs of this, and as I showed you, when the current flows, it passes from one to the other. Now we're going to connect them to different spots on here and see if any current makes a connection. Now as you can see, none does, because no current is able to get from here to here. All of it is being absorbed by this. This is an insulator. Now this is opposed to testing something made of metal. Now as you can see, the reading is 1, nothing's connected right now. But if we take both ends and connect them to this, you will notice that there is a resistance level that is coming up. And that means that this is conducting electricity and the vibrations of the electrons are flowing through this to reach both sides. So this is a conductor then, and has very little resistance when compared to something like the Lowe's paint stick. Now next we'll look at a few more that are pretty much most likely to be insulators since they're non-metallic and they're not known for being materials that conduct electricity easily. So like a rubber band for instance, and nothing is coming up. There is no electricity being conducted through the rubber band, since rubber is known to be an insulator. Let's try the same with the straw. And as before, nothing is making the connection. Same thing with this big roll of blue tape. Stick both ends in here like that. That's a lot of damage. Nothing. Okay, now let's work with something more metallic, like this butter knife here. Now we're going to connect both ends, and as you can see, there is current passing. Next up, we're going to test a bag of Lay's barbecue chips. Nothing. Now let's try a pair of bananas for some reason. Ugh, that's a lot of damage. Nothing. Now let's test out a simple oven. I forgot what these things are called, but let's test it out. That's a lot of damage. Nothing. That's a lot of damage. Now let's test out something a little bit more interesting, like, no, not gum, but the piece inside here, the foil that goes around it. Now, I'm no expert, but I would guarantee you that this is not 100% metal. But there are traces, so it should be interesting to try. Now, taking the two prongs of the voltmeter and connecting them to the gum gives us some kind of a charge. I guess there's enough metal in here to actually make it conduct enough electricity, and with very little resistance either. Now we're going to test out something a little bit more complicated. Now as you can see, I have two light bulbs here. One of them is a classic incandescent bulb and the other one is a modern day fluorescent bulb. Not quite the traditional kind that you see, but not with the spirally bulb, but it is a fluorescent bulb nonetheless. So what's important to note is that the incandescent bulb has a filament that runs up all the way through. You can't see it because this isn't the transparent kind, but it has a filament that runs all the way through, puts up some resistance, and then that's what makes the glow. So by that logic, this point at the end and this side piece connect through a filament that runs through the inside that connects to both of these, so it's a complete circle. So by that logic, there should be some connection here. And as you can see, it is. There's still a lot of resistance here, but that's to be expected when there's a, filament that's not just a direct connection. But current is still being passed from one point to the next. With this bulb, on the other hand, this is not exactly the same story. This one is a fluorescent bulb which works with gases and not a filament, so there is no point where this end and this end loop back and, meet each other. So by that logic, there should be no detectable amounts of resistance because no current is being transferred from this end to this end. So let's test that out. And as expected, nothing is being transferred. All right, so now let's test out something a little bit different. We have a glass here, just a simple, simple glass. There's nothing really special about it. And putting the two ends on it yields, well, nothing. But now let's take that same glass and fill it with some distilled water. It's important to note that while a lot of people think that water is a big conductor of electricity, it is actually the actual salts and stuff within the water that are the thing that, conducts electricity. So when the water is distilled, there should be, hypothetically, nothing in there that creates an electrical flow. So there should be no current that flows, much like when they're not even connected at all, because there's no electrons will pass through. So let's test that out. All right, just soak that in there. Nothing. And make sure this stays. Add a little bit of this. Now to test this out further, let's add something that will give some electrical conductivity, like salt, for instance. When you crank up the settings, you can find something. It can detect something, but it's very minimal. So this is a very difficult thing for the current to pass through, even when you add as much salt as I did. So that was my project. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was thought-provoking, I guess. Bye.